So we've had the reports now that Robert Mueller is using multiple grand juries in the Russia investigation. So it brings up the larger question here on a Monday. Where is it all going? We have the former Whitewater Independent Counsel, Robert Ray, with us. Bob, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
So if you have 2 or 3 grand juries, first of all, some people say this is a sign that it's obviously been picked up a level, and others have been telling us, come on, this is just routine. It's how you gather evidence. What do you think?
It's hard to know whether it's just routine, but even very basic things like, for example, if you were investigating Michael Flynn and you had a pre-existing investigation with a grand jury in Virginia, and during the course of that investigation, as an example, you uncovered false statements to the FBI and statements were taken in Washington, D.C., you'd have to submit that evidence to a...
It has to be in D.C.
In D.C. It would have to be venued there as opposed to the Eastern District of Virginia in Alexandria. So, you know, the fact that there's another grand jury sitting even in that little limited hypothetical doesn't suggest much more than you're going through the ordinary course of doing an investigation, and where things naturally should go, that's where they go.
No, but what about them going in a place where they wouldn't ordinarily naturally go? In other words, outside of the scope of just Russia. There's been so much talk that now there's this following the money. There have been various articles written about that, to the Trump finances and what have you.
Right.
What's the kind of latitude does
sort of hard to know what to make of that? I mean, I know that the special counsel inherited what was the beginnings of an investigation out of the Southern District of New York. So there's that sort of piece of it. You don't know where exactly ultimately that will go.
But if he finds something, he's looking into Russia, say, and he finds something else that's completely unrelated, but it's a kind of a business dealing that needs to be looked into, he can look into it.
He can, although, you know, prudence would dictate, and it seemed to be seconded this weekend by Rod Rosenstein, who appeared on the Fox News channel, to suggest, look, you know, if it's within his mandate, which is to say things directly related to the Russia investigation, he'll go on and do that which is within his mandate. Along the way, if he uncovers other things that at least arguably are not within his mandate, then he goes back before the Deputy Attorney General.
He's got to go to Rosenstein, right?
And he's got to go back to Rod Rosenstein and ask for an expansion of jurisdiction, which is what he's certainly capable of doing, and Rod Rosenstein in the ordinary course is likely to grant him that expansion of authority.
Right, that's just normal. That's almost like a rubber stamp, right? You look at it and you say,
well, I don't know if it's a rubber stamp. I mean, ultimately, Rod Rosenstein does control the scope of the investigation. But it, you know, what it does represent clearly is that if he were to decide not to allow Bob Mueller an expansion of jurisdiction, it would naturally give rise to the question, okay, well, then who's going to investigate this? It would otherwise be the Justice Department, and that presents a political issue, obviously one that would be disclosed, and there would be, you know, a debate about where appropriately that investigation should be pursued.
Now, I know it's tough because we're on the outside, both of us are on the outside looking in, but you obviously have expertise in this area. So from what you've seen, is there anything that jumps out at you as the most serious of the allegations or the parts of the investigation, be it the Don Jr. meeting or the Michael Flynn investigation in Virginia?
I really think it's too early to be able to gauge that and to tell. I mean, I think the more significant thing that you can read into all of this is that he's assembled a staff, including a staff of lawyers, 16 by the latest count, sufficient to have clusters of prosecutors and agents do various parts of the investigation simultaneously. And the second thing is that it indicates, because he's not only brought over people from within the department to be detailed to that investigation, but also people outside. Presumably they wouldn't have made a commitment to the investigation unless they expected and had been told to expect that the investigation would last well into 2018. And I think that's what we know. In other words, this is not going to be over in 30, 60, or 90 days.
And that's a political calculation that the administration has to make, because they've got to know that, you know, whatever you're doing, you're trying to push through taxes, you're trying to do infrastructure, whatever it is, this is there, right? It's not going anywhere. What's the earliest you could see this wrapping up?
Well, my hope is, having learned lessons from the Whitewater era and even before, that this investigation could be responsibly and swiftly concluded with the major prosecutorial decisions, if any, to be made.
What was the lesson was
before the midterm elections.
The lesson then was what? That you should have done it sooner?
You should have done it sooner, because it doesn't get better with age. I mean, you get sort of 18 months to 2 years to kind of either show something for what you've done or not. Otherwise, the public patience has been exhausted.
It's kind of weird, Rob. Why does something, I mean, why does it take that long? I mean, what's the most painstaking part of this process? Because the layman, they're saying, geez, I mean, let's look into it, get the phone calls we need, talk to the people we need, and draw some sort of conclusion. But every lawyer says This kind of thing takes forever. Why?
Well, part of it is, it's one thing to talk about collecting records and documents and issuing subpoenas for those kinds of things. It's another thing like, putting people before the grand jury. Issues arise along the way about whether or not someone will go voluntarily or one who asserts their Fifth Amendment privilege and whether to compel testimony and the consequences of that. Also, prosecuting at lower levels in the hopes of turning somebody as a cooperating witness in favor of, gathering further evidence.
Okay.
That process is time-consuming. Now, I don't know whether any of those things will be appropriate in this investigation. You have to sort of decide that there's some there initially to warrant taking those bigger prosecutorial steps. But if you're talking about prosecuting lower-level people in order to get to higher-level people, that's a time-consuming process. And that was really, frankly, what belabored the Starr investigation and other investigations during the Clinton era, is that, it went on for some time, and, all of a sudden you're not talking months any longer, you're talking years.
This is going to go on for some time, too. Maybe hopefully not that long, but good to see you, Bob Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.